Welcome to the Homeschool Sanity Show, where we help you homeschool with less frustration and more confidence. If you've ever felt a knot in your stomach at the thought of homeschooling high school, you are not alone. Questions like, will my teen be prepared for college or life? What about transcripts? Am I even qualified to do this? These fears can feel overwhelming, and they stop a lot of parents from even considering homeschooling through high school. But what if those fears aren't telling you the truth? Today, I'm joined by Rachel Kovac, author of Their Future is Shining Bright, and a homeschooling mom of 6 who, like many of us, never planned to homeschool, and certainly didn't plan to homeschool high school. In this conversation, we're tackling the biggest fears parents have about homeschooling teens and what's actually true instead. You'll hear why transcripts are simpler than you think, how homeschoolers can actually have more opportunities in high school, what real socialization looks like and why it might be better than you expect, and how homeschooling high school can strengthen, not strain, your relationship with your teen. If you've been on the fence about homeschooling high school or lying awake wondering if you're doing enough, this episode is for you. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me here on the Homeschool Sanity Show. I would love to have you begin by telling us more about you and your family.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So I'm the mom of 6 children, 5 daughters, and 1 son.
Okay.
Yeah. 2 are adults. Sorry about that. Can I start that over?
Yes.
Sorry. I'm used to saying 5 daughters.
I think people would be laughing. They'd be going, "What in the world? What just happened there?"
So sorry.
That's so funny.
I
'Cause
got a little too ahead of myself in my brain.
no problem. I have 5 boys and 1 girl.
No way.
Mhm. I have 5
Okay,
boys and 1 girl.
so I was thinking ahead to saying 5 daughters.
You
Okay.
were. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'm just going to pause and then I'll just delete all of that and then I'll let you answer the question. Okay.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I don't usually ask to do that, but
No
so
worries.
sorry.
No
Okay.
worries.
So I'm the mother of 6 children, 5 daughters and 1 son. 2 of my kids are in college, and I still have 4 at home who were homeschooling.
Fantastic. And what led you to homeschool initially?
Yeah, I like to say that to steal a phrase from C.S. Lewis, who says he was the most reluctant convert, I was the most reluctant homeschooler. I did not at all set out to homeschool. I was very interested in education and alternative education, but I just didn't think homeschooling was going to be for us. But when my son was in 2nd grade and we had to transfer into a more traditional school setting from a learning through play, preschool, and kindergarten, and then the transition was eased in 1st grade, but by 2nd grade, it was the typical things you might hear for people who are struggling in a traditional school setting, like a lack of recess, a lot of homework at the end of the day. And it was those things that made us feel like maybe we needed to contemplate where we were headed. And we also had a large family with 4 kids, 7 and under. And it just felt like none of us were thriving in that setting. And yet I really was racked with fear. And we had a series of things happen and then fall through. But those series of events gave me the courage to feel like I could pursue homeschooling, at least short term. And we started in the summer, feeling like, well, if it doesn't work out, I can send them to school in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know if I'm going to let you hold the title of most reluctant homeschooler. I really feel like I am in competition for that. I did not want to homeschool either when I was starting out. And then, as I've told my listeners so many times, it ended up being the most gratifying thing that I have done in my life. And I don't know if you feel that way, but
100%.
okay. Okay. So
And
we
that's
can,
where I like to
yeah.
tell people, don't let fear hold you back, because sometimes fear can be this thing that makes us feel like, well, am I qualified? Am I equipped? And even small things that seem small now, like I thought, will I be able to teach reading to my kids?
Mhm.
Don't you need like a master's degree to do that in reading? And I'm sure that's it's great to get that kind of education, but we can do a lot more than maybe we think we're capable of. And you learn it step by step. And you don't have to, you can take it day by day, semester by semester. And I think we will find that we're met where we are and we
Mhm.
learn so much.
So true. And I love that you're talking about fear because that is my next question for you on our topic for today about homeschooling high school. I get a lot of frightened parents asking me questions about how you do that. What do you think the biggest fear parents have about homeschooling high school, and what do you say to reassure them?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I have a whole chapter on fears and myths. A lot of fears are actually myths
Hmm.
about homeschooling in high school. And so I devoted an entire chapter. I think there are quite a few. I think maybe we had 14 or something. But I think they tend to fall into various categories. One is, will they be prepared for the future, whether that's college or a non-college path? Another might be around missing out. What about the high school experience? So I began my book with that topic. That was something my kids were asked a lot by adults. Well, what about the high school experience? Meaning things like prom, homecoming, those traditional milestones. And then I think parents worry about the socialization aspect. Will they have the social experiences that they think they need for the high school years?
Mhm. Okay, I think those are excellent. Let's start with preparation for college in particular. How do you help parents think through creating a transcript that reflects their academic record at home? I hear a lot of fearful questions about that particular topic.
Yeah, I myself, even though we had homeschooled for so long, was really afraid to put together a transcript. I don't know why, because the truth is, it's very easy. For me, the hardest part about doing the transcript was finding a good template. And I have one on my website, rachelkovac.com, KOVAC, that you can download if you're interested in that. But I think it's the question that underlies the transcript that is more important, which is which classes would I like my kids to take in the high school years? And the high school years are special because there are so many opportunities for homeschoolers. I might even say more opportunities than any other time because kids can do classes online if that's their thing. They can do dual enrollment. They can do certification programs, the trades, apprenticeships. And
Mhm.
so if one of the fears is, how will I teach these classes? The answer is you don't have to teach them all yourself. The world is your oyster. There are so many classes your children could take. And so in terms of forming the transcript, that really depends on the individual child and what they are looking to do. And the classes they take and the experiences they have that will be on the transcript can actually help them decide what they want to do in the future. So, for example, my son is a pre-med student at Texas A&M. He's a junior. He's applying to med schools right now. But only 15% of students who start pre-med graduate undergrad with a pre-med degree.
Mm.
And only 5% make it all the way through because they start taking classes and they think, I don't really want to devote 10 years of my life to this kind of study. Well, if you can start to do some of those classes or what they might call the weed out classes in high school, then you might realize, okay, this isn't going to be the path for me. And that saves time and money. And
Yeah.
so getting our kids exposure, whether it's testing through job shadowing, internships, apprenticeships, those are all things that can help them discern what they want to do. And then that saves time and money.
Mm. I love that. And I was laughing about your comments on a transcript template. I downloaded one years ago from HSLDA, and I don't think it's available anymore. And I just felt like it was, this rare commodity that I needed to hang on to. So I love that you have one available, and I will put that link in the show notes for
Thank
people.
you.
You are
It was also
welcome.
developed alongside a college advisor who was like, this is like, you want the transcript, if your child is applying to college, to be very straightforward, to be like something that someone can look at and get the information quickly. So we try to make it very streamlined because homeschoolers, transcripts can be complicated if they're outsourcing classes and from where and all of that. And also, there is a benefit to having a transcript, even if you don't think your child is headed to college, because sometimes the military might ask for it if they're going on that path, or an employer, or even you could get a discount on auto insurance.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
We're tracking together.
Yeah.
And I also just wanted to say, I think sometimes the transcript creation itself is tapping into imposter syndrome because we don't have formal classes for everything. We aren't necessarily putting our child into a regular classroom or dual enrollment for every class. And it feels like we're maybe cheating to put down this is a course worth this amount of credit. And I know you're going to agree with me. Just do it because it does count. You have no reason to feel intimidated or insecure about that. So just go ahead and record everything.
100%. And I wrote a section in my book, it's an appendix about making a transcript. And I talk about how this exact thing. So my son was interested in nutrition. He did a really deep dive over about 2 years. And so we figured out the hours that are required for it to count as a class. And we then matched up those hours with, okay, you get a semester of credit for the time you've spent studying nutrition, even though he spent about 2 years doing it, or photography. So they can pursue the things that they want to pursue and then turn that into a class on their transcripts.
Mm, excellent. Excellent. Okay. So you mentioned something in the middle of our discussion about transcripts about preparing teens who aren't going to attend a 4-year college or even a 2-year college. Maybe they are ready to go into the trades, or maybe they would like to start their own business. What does homeschooling high school look like for a teen like that?
Yeah, so I have information on both ideas, one for college bound teens, and then the other in the back of my book, I have an appendix with 265 career options that do not require a college degree. And some of them are stackable or could be passion projects to get your child thinking about what they might want to do. So I think both options are something to consider. And so now, um, a lot of times people used to think of dual enrollment as being something for precocious students who are high achievers. But now dual enrollment can be something for kids of all paths, whether they want to start testing out, okay, do I want to do this certification program? And then it could be something that could be stackable. So let's say you want to do something in medicine and you're like, maybe I want to be a nurse or a doctor, but let's start here and see, and I can test it. There's so many options for that in the high school years that students can try, and they have more flexibility with their schedules because the high school homeschooling in high school resembles more of a college schedule where you're taking classes here and there, but you're not in school from like 8 until 3 and then doing extracurriculars for the next few hours and then games and coming home at the end of the day exhausted.
Mm.
There's so much more time for kids to explore their interests and still have friendships. And so I think that's really the benefit of homeschooling in high school.
Yes, I completely agree. One of my friend's sons completed his EMT training while he was homeschooling high school. I just thought that was amazing, incredible. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, anything is really possible with the flexibility that homeschooling high school affords us. So I hope that's a little plug for you if you are
That's
considering it.
Yeah, and thinking of what you're saying about the EMT, my daughter's going to do that this summer. She's a freshman in college. But when you have that, she doesn't necessarily want to be an EMT because she's
Mhm.
going to be studying, but you can then work in a lab drawing blood. Or there are all kinds of other things that open up to you when you just have that one certification. So she can get clinical hours and also earn more money than a typical college student because she has those skills.
Absolutely. Yes. So, so good. Okay. So now let's talk about the relationship issues. I think sometimes parents, and I would probably put myself in that category, are concerned about what continuing to homeschool through high school might do to your relationship with your child, especially if that child is maybe torn about not going to a traditional school. How can homeschooling high school years, those years, actually strengthen our relationship with our kids, do you think?
So, one thing that's really exciting is that homeschooling is the fastest growing form of education in the US. It's growing 7 times faster than private school enrollment. And so this isn't like 1998 where you're all alone and you might not have a lot of resources. Now there are so many social opportunities for kids. So, for example, homeschooling co ops that do things like prom, homecoming. My kids went to 2 or 3 different homecomings because they're invited to different co ops.
Hmm.
And so they might have a lot of opportunities for things like that. And then there are just more opportunities for, as I said, dual enrollment, which provides a social experience if you're interested in that, or even community activities like my son and daughter do a French club together. Excuse me, my husband and my daughter do a French club together. That's people of all ages. In our city, we have an orchestra for youth, a youth orchestra, and a youth choir, so the kids can do that. So I think there are more and more opportunities than ever before. That's really exciting. But in we also have to think about the way that kids have never traditionally in human history been primarily surrounded by their peers for so much of their time. And so peer relationships are important in high school, and our kids are starting to spread their wings. But we also want them in a scenario where they're around people that are not their peers, that are older and younger, and for them to be able to move fluidly between different groups of people, not only people who are like them. And in their exact same age. And so there are a lot of opportunities for our kids to thrive in other ways where they're around people that are older and younger. And I think that is something to consider too.
Hmm. And then, did you find when your students who were in high school were maybe attending classes outside of your home, did you find that you were still able to maintain a strong relationship with them?
Yes, I felt there were 2 things that we did that helped us maintain a strong relationship. One is we've always tried to protect our morning time. So we still try to have those morning hours together. Occasionally there was a class that my daughter needed and we had to cut our morning time a little bit short, like let's say 10:30 or 11, but we still try to guard those hours as this is our time to read aloud, to discuss questions and then the other thing is because my kids didn't have to get up early, we had the nights so we could have the late night conversations. The teenage brain is primed to stay up late anyway. It's hard for them to be pushed into an early schedule in general because they're not feeling tired until often after 11. In Europe, legislation is being passed to make the school day later because it's
Hmm.
just not that biologically natural for kids to wake up early. And so we had that time in the morning, in the beginning of the day to really connect as a family. And then also at the end of the day, because we didn't have to get up early, we could stay up late talking about things. And then there's just the flexibility of not being bound to a traditional school schedule. So we could go, let's say, on a road trip to connect with another homeschool family or to go to a national park in the off season where we could just experience things when they weren't so crowded, when it was less expensive. That was a big perk for us.
Absolutely. Us too. And one of the things that was surprising to me is because I had my students dual enrolled and they would bring their course content to me to discuss. And it was another way for me to impart our family's values and to reinforce those and guide them in how to manage teaching that was at odds with our family's values. And I feel like that was such a wonderful experience that I got to do that with them before they went away to college, and it would be a lot more difficult to do.
Yes. And my daughter was in a philosophy class where the professor was teaching things that, we don't believe. But what was really cool is he was open to conversation, and actually he welcomed it because the kids would just usually sit there with their eyes glazed over, like not engaged. And so my daughter would come home and say, "This is what he said today." And he would say, "Do you guys want to talk about this?" And she would go studying like the philosophers of old and, come back with her own perspective. And the kids were all talking about it. And it was really exciting. And I was glad that she could go through that experience with us still beside her and processing it with her day by day, not just dropping her into that.
Hmm.
Um, and then, okay, when I saw what he was teaching, I would say I wouldn't want the rest of my kids taking that particular class, but you learn from that as well.
You too. You definitely do.
I'm like, I think I would want them taking something more beautiful because,
Mhm.
it was a big time investment.
But even so, I mean, that's real life. Once our kids are adults and even after they're out of college, if they choose to go, they're going to encounter people who have a worldview that doesn't line up with theirs. Or
Hmm.
certainly the one that they are accustomed to. And it's good for them to get some experience being exposed to other ideas
Hmm.
and then to have our guidance going along with that. So it's one of the reasons why I'm so thankful that we chose to homeschool high school.
Hmm.
Another issue that I think parents have when they're considering homeschooling high school is how do they know what classes to actually teach? How can they make sure that their students are getting a quality, well rounded homeschool education?
Yeah, so I think one thing you can do is just see what's required by your state. If you're thinking of staying in on a more conventional path, because then that lays out. And if your child is thinking about going to a more competitive college, then I think it's really important because one myth we had to learn the hard way is that we were told in the homeschooling community, competitive colleges really want out of the box kids. Do as much like unique, completely original. And with my son, we did more of that. And then what we learned is he wanted to go to a more competitive college and he wanted to earn scholarships and they wanted to see more rigorous coursework.
Mm,
And so they weren't as open to the whole they like if you're going to a traditional college, they might have more traditional expectations, right?
mhm.
And so for them, they wanted to see like AP courses, advanced sciences and things like that. And so I write about this in the book how we experienced some disappointments when the scholarships didn't come through for us because we didn't know what to expect. We did things differently with my daughter and aligned she wants to be a physician assistant. So and she knew what kind of colleges she wanted to apply to. Call the admissions offices. Don't just take what you hear from other families necessarily, like call yourself, see what they're looking for. And she was offered so many scholarships. And so I think part of it is your child. And if you want to conform to your state standards in terms of a more traditional path, or you can be out of the box if your child has a different path too. I mean, I don't think there's just one way.
Mhm, mhm. I think that is definitely the case. Well, you have been mentioning your book, and now I want to call it out specifically. It's called Their Future is Shining Bright. Can you tell us more about what we will find in its pages?
Yes, thank you so much. So, the book is called Their Future Shining Bright, and I talk first about why homeschool in high school. I lay out how high school as we know it in the US came to be. And then I go through myths and fears that people have about homeschooling. The next section is called Designing Your Custom Homeschooling um, or homeschool education, and it's about all the different options that we have for homeschooling in high school. The next is on connection, both family life and then connection with community. And then it ends on preparing for the future, on shadowing, how we can help our kids learn career discernment, and then finally, college applications for college bound students.
All right, excellent. So, where's the best place for us to find a copy?
Yes, it's a Available wherever books are sold. And what's really amazing is I had the person who runs dual enrollment in our city of 1.5 million come beside me for 2 chapters. We Zoomed and he gave me a lot of feedback to help show all paths. And then I had a college advisor spend about 6 hours, and he's an elite college advisor that normally charges thousands to help walk parents through the college application process for that path. So I was really grateful to not just do this alone, but to be joined by some really amazing people.
That's excellent. Now, Rachel, do you have some social media accounts that people could follow?
Yes. So I am on Instagram at Rachel Stitch Together. I used to sew my kids' clothes.
Okay,
That was
okay.
back when they had like whimsical names, and now Rachel Kovac is taken. I have a
Of
website.
course.
I have a website where you can find downloads and other things. And then I'm also on Substack, but I'm not on social media that much.
Mhm,
But
okay.
yeah, that's where you can find me.
That's fair. And your website name is?
Rachel Kovac, KOVAC.com.
Well, I hope this conversation gave you a deep breath of relief and maybe even a little excitement about what homeschooling high school could look like for your family. If you take nothing else away from today, remember this. You don't have to have everything figured out to begin. You just have to take the next step. Rachel shared such a helpful perspective that homeschooling high school isn't about recreating school at home. It's about creating a customized path that actually fits your teen. And that's where confidence grows for both of you. If you'd like more support, be sure to check the show notes for a link to Rachel's book, Their Future is Shining Bright, along with her transcript template and resources. And if this episode encouraged you, would you do me a quick favor? Share it with a friend who's feeling nervous about homeschooling high school. You might be the reason they take that next step. Before you go, don't forget to check out the Sanity shortcut in today's show notes. It's your quick, practical takeaway if you want to implement what you've learned right away. Thanks so much for joining me today. Remember, you can homeschool with less frustration and more confidence. This has been a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.